AYANEO caused a bit of a stir when they first announced a clamshell with a choice of keyboard or dual screen. Let's find out if 2 is better than 1 as we take a look at both models, compare their features and performance, play a bunch of games and emulators and decide which one is best. Both the DS and KB models come with the same content. We will be unboxing the dual screen model. First we have a user guide and some info sheets. Underneath there is the AYANEO Flip itself. We will show them in more detail shortly. Inside the first box we have a charger, and you can find adapters for most plug socket types in the second box. Also in the second box are 2 USB Type-C to Type-A adapters. In the third box there are 2 grips which you can replace on the underside of the Flip to provide more grip. And in the fourth and final box is a USB Type-C cable. The Flip is available in 2 models, KB for keyboard and DS for dual screen. Both measure around 7.08 by 4.01 by 1.17 inches and weighs 650 grams. The KB model flips open to reveal a backlit keyboard. I have to admit I'm not a fan of the grey text on silver keys. It makes them a little hard to see when the backlight is not on. The backlight is RGB and can be customised in the iSpace software. The keys are very small, so you would not be able to type as like on a laptop keyboard, but it's perfectly fine for thumb typing whilst browsing, logging into games, short messages, etc. The DS model flips open to reveal a second display. It is a 3.5-inch IPS touchscreen with a 960 by 480 resolution. By default it shows the system stats on screen, and you can interact with it to change the performance settings, access shortcuts or display software on the screen. It's handy for watching a video guide whilst playing a game or having Discord chat open whilst gaming. Both models have a 7-inch IPS touchscreen with a 1080p resolution and 120Hz refresh rate. The display's hinge fully opens to just under 180 degrees and has 2 angled locks in between for the most popular viewpoints at 120 and 150 degrees. On the lower half the sides are all effect joysticks, D-pad, gaming buttons and 2 additional buttons for the AYANEO Space software. Beside the volume button is an additional button on the DS model which controls the screen functionality. To the right is the power button with integrated fingerprint scanner and an optical finger mouse. On the bottom is a 3.5mm headphone port. Along the top are shoulder buttons and Hall effect triggers. Beside those are the macro buttons that you can configure in the iSpace software. Next we have an Oculink port for connecting an eGPU to, for example. There is a USB 4 and a 3.2 port, finishing with a covered micro SD card reader. Both models are powered by the AMD Ryzen 7 7840U processor. We know from the other handhelds that this is great for gaming on. There will be an 8840U processor model coming out at a later date. For RAM, there are configurations up to 64GB of LPDDR5x RAM and up to 2TB M.2 PCIe for SSD storage. For communications, there's Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.2. Both models have a 45 Wh battery, which in our tests lasted around 1 hour 8 minutes for the DS model and 1 hour 13 for the KB model. Also, whilst running the benchmarks, we tested the fan noise and thermals. We got around 67 decibels highest fan noise on both models. For the temperature test, we saw a highest temperature of 51 degrees C on the KB model. It was a few degrees higher on the DS with 57 degrees C, most likely due to the additional heat build up from the second display. We will now benchmark both models as well as compare them with other similar handhelds for their performance. PCMark tests the overall day-to-day performance of the device, from web browsing to video conferencing, working with large office documents and even image editing. We see great scores for the Flip keyboard model, but the dual screen model falls a bit behind. Overall they are both good scores, and it means whilst not gaming you can also use the Flip for boring work tasks just fine. On 3DMark we are running Time Spy, Night Trade and Firestrike benchmarks. The Flip KB takes the lead over the DS on all 3 tests, with a noticeable gap in particular on the Night Trade benchmark. Overall both models remain competitive with the other handhelds. Cinebench tests the CPU's single and multi-core performance. For single core, we see strangely low performance for the DS compared to the KB model. We rerun the test just in case there was an issue and got the same score. But when compared with other models, the scores can vary quite a bit. For multi-core, we do see the DS drop a little there. We are running Forza Horizon 5 on the very low graphic settings. Overall, both Flip models do very well, with the best frames per second at 28 watts TDP on both resolutions. We do see lower performance at low TDPs, but this can be how the power is set up. The two models have pretty similar results on Shadow of the Tomb Raider. We do see some differences when compared to other models, similar performance to the AYANEO Slide, but the GPDs have higher scores. Again, this can be partly due to how the power is set up and different drivers. Our last benchmark is Street Fighter 6 on the highest graphic settings. Again, the AYANEO performance on Battleground is lower than its GPD and 1x player counterparts, and we see more comparable FPS on the two other tests. The Flip has an Oculink port, so we are able to test the performance with an eGPU with the internal display and an external 4K monitor. We are testing with the brand new GPD G1 2024 eGPU docking station, but it will also work equally as well with the 1x Player 1x GPU. The Flip got very good scores on both internal display and output to external. On external display we got over 50,000 on Night Raid, which is our highest score on any handheld with an eGPU. For Forza Horizon 5, the Flip does very well across all the resolutions. It takes the lead in all but 720p with very good frame rates. The performance switches in favour of the WinMax 223 on Shadow of the Tomb Raider. We saw the same differences in the integrated GPU tests, so it may depend how your power balance is set up. And our last benchmark is Street Fighter 6 at 4K and 1080p on the highest graphic settings. At 1080p we are essentially getting full frames per second, and at 4K we can see very similar frames per second for both models, with a frame or so error margin. We did notice that on the DS model there were some performance drops if the IS-based software was running. This could cause anything from a few FPS drops up to a more noticeable amount. We performed a few different tests with and without the software running on the second display to confirm this, and it can affect performance. But overall the Flip models are decent performers. We did see one or two instances where performance is lower than others, and we did also see very good performance with Oculink. There's nothing much to complain about on the KB model, but maybe a bit of a performance issue with the DS model. Here are some games running with the graphic settings we used along with the game's audio. The 7840U is great for emulation, and generally you should have no issues running emulators up to the more recent ones. We will take a brief look at some of these more recent emulators, and also check out one that takes advantage of the second display. Let's wrap things up now with some of our thoughts on the AYANEO Flip. Which model is better? Here are my main takeaways after spending some time with the handhelds. The keyboard is functional, but only for brief text as you would expect. I'm not a fan of the grey on silver, but that's a personal opinion. The second display is a nice feature to have. If AYANEO added an on-screen keyboard, then it would mostly negate the need for a physical keyboard. But otherwise, how often would you actually use the second display? I struggle to find any long-term uses for it. It's something to consider. In terms of price, the dual screen model is around $40 higher. It's not a massive difference, but you can save a bit of cash if the second screen is not something you desire. And for performance, both models are roughly the same performance as each other, but do keep in mind that we did see some performance drops on the DS model when iSpace was running. This varies between games and TDPs, but otherwise seemed fine when we closed the software. And if you have or plan to use an eGPU, then you can expect very good performance. The internal graphics performance is higher than most other models, and we saw some of the best benchmark results on an external display. Personally, I would go for the KB model out of the two. The DS model is, in my opinion, a bit of a gimmick. Unless you are a die-hard dual screen emulator fan, you will probably switch off the second display to save some battery life and performance after the initial wow factor wears off. Let me know which one you would buy in the comments. We are always interested to read others' opinions and which model they would choose. What would you use the second screen for? You can learn more and order your AYANEO Flip, DS or KB models from us at DROIX.co.uk or DROIX.net for worldwide shipping. Use the discount code FLIPPING5OFF for a 5% discount on the checkout. Don't forget to subscribe and like to help grow this channel. It really does help to get our videos recognised. Thanks for watching, and we will see you back in the next one. Have you subscribed yet? Go on, you know you want to.